Hello, I am Matthew Dorfman, and my migration project is on counter-urbanization. The picture on the cover page is an example of mass migration. Counter-urbanization is a demographic and social process whereby people move from urban areas to rural areas. It is the opposite of urbanization, which has been happening since the Industrial Revolution, when the jobs were all in the cities. All migration falls into many different categories of migration. There is migration versus refugee, internal versus international, and intra-regional versus inter-regional. The difference between a migrant and a refugee is the reason for migration. A migrant is moving from an area based on their own choice, but a refugee is leaving a place in order to escape from some form of persecution, whether it is political or religious. The difference between internal and international migration is whether or not the migrant leaves the country. If they stay in the country, then it is internal, but if they leave, then it is international. The difference between intra-regional and inter-regional migration is whether or not the migrant leaves the region from which they came from. Counter-urbanization is an example of migration, internal migration, and intra-regional migration. As I stated before, counter-urbanization is when people go from urban areas to rural areas. An example of counter-urbanization is moving from New York City to North Carolina. The pictures below explain the places from where these migrants go to and come from. In the picture on the left, the lighted areas are urban areas, and the dark areas are rural. In the picture to the right, the blue areas represent urban areas, and the red represent the rural areas. In counter-urbanization, people move from the light areas on the left to the red areas on the right. In every migration, there are push factors that go into making the decision to move. A push factor is a reason to leave the place that you currently live in. Examples of push factors for urban areas are high local taxes, overcrowdedness, and pollution. The picture below is an overcrowded area in a city. In every migration, there are also many pull factors that go into making the decision to move. A pull factor is a reason to migrate to a certain destination. Examples of pull factors for rural areas include cheap land, quiet surroundings, and high amenity. I have a friend who recently moved to North Carolina with her family. They had left because they couldn't afford life on Long Island, and many other members of their family had already made the move to North Carolina for the same reason. Their dad was able to find a job, and they now have more money to spend and love the quiet and more relaxed environment. It is safe to say that they all love it there. Counter-urbanization affects the origin cities very much. It, of course, has both positive and negative impacts. Positive effects include the lessening of pressure on cities and relief for government officials. Negative effects include a lack of labor, slower development, and hurts the overall economy. Counter-urbanization affects the destination towns very much as well. The destinations have both positive and negative impacts as well. Positive impacts include faster development and more people to sell crops to. Negative impacts include environmental damage and conflict between folk and popular culture. The effects on the destination is pretty much the opposite of the effects on the origins. Now, just to wrap up things, counter-urbanization is an example of migration, internal, and intra-regional migration. It happens between the major cities such as New York City and rural states such as North Carolina. The push factors include high local taxes, overcrowdedness, and pollution. Pull factors include cheap land, quiet surroundings, and high amenity. The effects on the origin include relieves pressure on cities, their labor force becomes lacking, slower development, and hurts the overall economy. The effects on the destination include faster development, more people to sell crops to, environmental damage, and conflict between folk and popular culture. That is all.